desire is. As your desire is, so is your will. As your will is, so is your deed. As your deed is, so is your destiny. As your deed is, so is your destiny. And I can't help but think about the presentation yesterday where we were told that the very nature of a symbol is inadequate to actually capture the essence of experience. But the success of a symbol comes from the closeness in the match between our intention and our accomplishment. There is the effectiveness. How closely can we match the symbol to what it is we desired? And if we desire it, perhaps we can manifest it. I take many of these thoughts from 7 Spiritual Laws of Success by Deepak Chopra, a scholar, a doctor, who has studied the mind-body connection. And he says that it is important in one of these laws, the law of Dharma, that we make 3 commitments as writers. First, I am going to seek my higher self beyond ego through spiritual practice. If I did not practice spiritually, quietly, I could not get in touch with that universal mind that inspires my work. Beyond ego. And I have labored and doubted and worried about my motives for more than 20 years for writing. Is it an ego thing? I hope not. Not just that. But a fervent desire to connect, to speak my voice with courage. A second commitment in the law of Dharma, and that is the law of purpose. I am going to discover my unique talents. Now this is where my doubt occurs. Unique talents? Is there talent? Yes, I think so, within each of us. The talent in the courage of our voices. Third commitment. I am going to ask myself how I am best suited to serve humanity. How am I best suited to serve humanity? And that is my intention, is to serve humanity with my voice. Thich Nhat Hanh, in his teachings on love, observes 5 mindfulness trainings. And he says we must be aware, to be awake to these things, aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of life. I am committed to cultivating compassion and learning ways to protect the lives of people, animals, plants, and minerals. A second mindfulness training. I am aware of the suffering caused by exploitation, social injustice, stealing, and oppression. I am committed to cultivating loving kindness. When people sometimes pick up my poems, they don't feel that loving kindness because sometimes they're so impassioned about injustice. But they are so informed by love. A third mindfulness training, aware of the suffering caused by sexual misconduct. I am committed to cultivating responsibility and learning ways to protect the safety and integrity of individuals, couples, families, children, society. I will do everything in my power to protect children. And that is a recurring theme in my work. Fourth mindfulness training, aware of the suffering caused by, and here is one that is so relevant to us as writers. aware of the suffering caused by unmindful speech and the inability to listen to others. I am committed to cultivating loving speech and deep listening in order to bring joy and happiness to others and relieve others of their suffering, knowing what words can create. That words can create happiness or suffering. I am determined to speak truthfully. In the Christian tradition, it is to speak the truth with love. I will not shrink from truth in the words of my poetry. And the fifth mindfulness training, aware of the suffering caused by unmindful consumption. I am committed to cultivating good health, both physical and mental, for myself, my family, and my society. Well, on the fifth mindfulness training, I'm still working on that. On the consumption deal, I have to be a little bit more mindful. The great Sufi poet Hafiz says this about this holy hunger of ours to write. Sometimes when we're resisting delving into the sweet and sour fruits of life, when we're resisting, as some of the poets have already talked about, picking up the pen yet one more time to try to say and often fail to make the words match the intensity of our passions, those experiences in our lives, those sweet and sour fruits heaped upon our plate, those images. Hafiz says this in a simple and eloquent poem. He says, sometimes I say to a poem, not now. Can't you see I am bathing? But the poem usually doesn't care and quips, too bad, Hafiz. No getting lazy. You promised God you would help out. And he just came up with his new tune. Sometimes I say to a poem, I don't have the strength to wring out another drop of the sun. And the poem will often respond by climbing onto a barroom table, then lifts its skirt, winks, causing the whole sky to fall. Now, I love that poem by Hafiz. That poem personified in that metaphor, that it has climbed onto a barroom table, then lifts its skirt, winks, causing the whole sky to fall. We mustn't resist. We don't resist. You have written such eloquent work. I have been hearing it for 3 days. And you have yielded to that beautiful call. How do we also yield to the desire to make the words, the symbols match the image and experience? I am so inspired by Mary Oliver. And it seems to me that Mary Oliver just has this ease of writing. Apparently, she thought the same thing about Stanley Kunitz. And in this poem entitled Stanley Kunitz, she represents another perspective on his approach to writing, with whom she had studied, you see. And it's called simply that, Stanley Kunitz. I used to imagine him coming from the house like Merlin, strolling with important gestures through the garden, where everything grows so thickly, where birds sing, little snakes lie on the boughs, thinking of nothing but their own good lives, where petals float upward with colors exploding, and trees open their moist pages of thunder. It has happened every summer for years. But now I know more about the great wheel of growth and decay and rebirth. I know my vision for a falsehood. Now I see him coming from the house. I see him on his knees, cutting away the diseased, the superfluous, coaxing the new, knowing that the hour of fulfillment is buried in years of patience, yet willing to labor like that on the mortal wheel. Oh, what good it does. What good it does the heart to know it isn't magic. Like the human child I am, I rush to imitate. I watch him as he bends among the leaves and vines to hook some weed or other. Even when I do not see him, I think of him there, raking and trimming, stirring up those sheets of fire between the smothering weights of earth, the wild and shapeless air. She added a new perspective about the ease of writing. Now, some people I know seem to be able to write a first draft and just spin it out with sheer eloquence. I weed the garden. You know, the seed comes and the shoots come up, and I just have to watch it and water it and work it and work it. It is that other bird on the branch watching and weeding. It was not okay with me to just talk about Stanley Kunitz without going to one of his poems. And he gives us a bit of advice about how to take the stories of our lives and integrate them into poetry. So I go to Stanley Kunitz now. I have walked through many lives, some of them my own. And I am not who I was, though some principle of being abides, from which I struggle not to stray. When I look behind as I am compelled to look, before I can gather strength to proceed on my journey, I see the milestones dwindling toward the horizon, and the slow fires trailing from the abandoned campsites over which scavenger angels wheel on heavy wings. Oh, I have made myself a tribe out of my true affections, and my tribe is scattered. How shall the heart be reconciled to its feast of losses? In a rising wind, the manic dust of my friends, those who fell along the way, bitterly stings my face. Yet I turn, exalting somewhat with my will intact to go wherever I need to go, and every stone on the road precious to me. In my darkest night, when the moon was covered, and I roamed through wreckage, a nimbus-clouded voice directed me, live in the layers, not the litter. Though I lack the art to decipher it, no doubt the next chapter in my book of transformations is already written. I am not done with my changes. I am not done with my changes. Live in the layers, not on the litter of our lives. That is really good advice about all of us. But does that mean, as we attempt to speak the truth with love, that we do not acknowledge the pain and the truth of that pain? I don't think it does. It means in the layers, acknowledging it, dealing with it. When I came here, I thought I was supposed to do not just workshop, but reading as well. And so I brought with me a few poems that speak to the truth that I have known. Now, the first one is a welcome, a much delayed welcome, because I started with wisdom and truths much greater than I can ever hope to be. But this poem of welcome is for you. Come well, or even unwell, into my home, knowing gladness your presence brings. Let's hug full-chested, no brief side squeeze, nor one-boobed reserve. With you, I won't worry my unmade face, my unswept floor, that dangling spider web above the door. We'll sit at the table, sip and say everything, or nothing, whatever. Maybe we'll chuckle life's little ironies, tisking vicissitudes, too bads, frowning mouths, shrugging crinkled, eyeful smiles. Or we'll toss our heads back like two ruby-throated hummingbirds, gulping and laughing life's red nectar. Come on in, my friend. Let's set a sacred space for 1, 2, or ever how many happens here where love abides. Then, when time arrives for other life to lift us from our chairs, we'll walk arm in arm to the door and hug again, courage for the coming fears, impendings, the dreaded alreadys. You may go then, feeling better for having set a spell, reflecting in the mirror of my eyes that you were leaving twice as tall and beautiful as you were when you arrived. As I mentioned earlier, in those moments of great self-doubt, we're always seeking validation and the need to connect those experiences of our lives. The next poem is the upshot of that, and I'm very proud to report that Calliope has just taken it. It was a national competition, and I submitted it, and I'm so glad that this voice connected. It's called The Rhythm of Rice. Sorrow spills onto the floor, not like milk's single splat and white spread, not like syrup, sticky melancholy, oozing black, nor even olive oil's slippery sheening. Rather like raw rice, spilling uncontainable from its ripped sack, splattering staccato across the countertop, across the floor, its rhythms unrecognizable according to some physical law I cannot understand. So as I bend to retrieve rice, tracing tile like braille, its crevices, bumps, corners, unwilling to miss a grain, I wonder how much rice it takes to fill the holes of the living undead. The living undead father who lifts limp the broken body of his boy. Neck swinging and bobbing from the crook of his arm as he trudges toward the gaping mouth of his wife, who stops wailing then to stare silent beyond despair at some physical law she cannot comprehend. What rice draws 4 fingers to the warm bowl to scoop life into mouths undead and unliving? What hunger opens lips to wrap around spoons, to pull life in, to press it against an untasting tongue, to chew it without will. How? How does one swallow loss? What force washes the wave, slides the mountain down, slits the slender throat, rapes the wide, wide eyes that cannot apprehend? Source does not matter. Why does not matter. Neither does how. Only the is counts now. Like rice spilling random from the ripped sack. I stoop to my knees seeking, but cannot see each pointy seed to drop into my tallest pot, where I'll steam it and mound it like love into the gaping small bowl cupped feebly by the saddest hungry hands. I wore that poem for many days after the tsunami. The mudslides were going on that washed away so many lives or buried them. And I had to remove myself from it because of the pain. But I felt it was really important. There were all these philosophical and spiritual questions going on surrounding those events. Well, how did the people, their various spiritual orientations, explain these things, you see? How does the Hindu explain tragedy? How does the Muslim explain tragedy? How does the Christian explain tragedy? And to me, those were not the questions. The questions was, how do we deal with it? And so the rhythm of rice, that rice spilling onto the floor. Now, I'm originally from Louisiana, so we eat a lot of rice in Louisiana. And I open a lot of sacks of rice for my family. And so that rice spilling out onto the floor to me was the metaphor I chose. And it dealt with these holy hungers. These holy hungers for peace, for comfort. When I try to write the truth as I know it, as I see it, I do have these causes, and I can't get out of the way of them. And this is a poem that I wrote, and which is in the Book of the Year, that uses a metaphor of the cormorant. As you know, the cormorant is a bird that the Japanese fishermen would tie strings about the necks so that the bird would catch their fish, and they would take the fish. But they would have to tie those strings tightly enough that the cormorant couldn't swallow the fish, but loosely enough that they could continue to dive and bring up the fish so that they could eat. And though some of my friends in here have heard this poem before, I will share it again because it deals with the truth of oppression. It's called Killing the Cormorant. And though you've tied the string around my neck and ankles so long and so tight now that I cannot dive, much less swallow the fish to feed your belly or mine. And even after your hunger's filled and the tether's gone, I don't dive. I fear drowning now. And fish don't taste so good anymore. I feel the wriggle beneath the scale and see the milky eye, and though my belly craves and my beak curves long toward new waters, I cannot lift my wings, these black shadowed weights enough to mount the sky.